Hi, I'm Florian. I'm currently studying philosophy and theater studies, and today I'm going to be talking about, well, theater studies. Bear with me if I have to look down from the camera sometime, because I'm not a native speaker, so I've prepared myself a little script to help me. So, while theater might not be everyone's cup of tea, there are certain aspects of it that are applicable to our daily life. Sociologist Irving Goffman wrote his 1956 book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, which is famous in theater and general cultural studies, as well as sociology, based on the idea that a certain imagery of theater can be applied to social interactions. He said that our social world is essentially a stage, and when we act in society, we do so based on social roles. I guess everyone would agree that one acts differently when alone at home, with close friends, in public, at a job interview. Basically, everyone has a certain image of self-expression that differs from situation to situation. And what we do and what we don't do is linked to us wanting to preserve that image in the heads of our audience, that being the other people in that situation. We do that by controlling the kind and amount of information others get about us. By doing so, we help to define the situation and thereby shape how others might react. There is, however, also the aspect of the viewer in that situation, because they hold the image they have of us, especially if they don't know us well, against their own past experience with people similar to us, how they came to expect people to act in the given situation in general, and sadly, often unreflected stereotypes. Sometimes those stereotypes are stronger than the image we convey. But to some degree, we can use those expectations to our advantage by giving others only the information they link with a certain image. By shaping how they see us, we can control how they treat us once again. There will always be some kind of disparity between the expression we try to give ourselves and the expression we convey, but I think that's a level of detail we don't really need to go into right now. There are aspects of our self-expression that are more easily changeable, but if we really want to influence the situation, we have to also control aspects that others deem to be reliable to convey our real feelings. For example, if someone visits his girlfriend's mother for the first time and gets served the soup for dinner, he might nod and smile and verbally affirm how delicious that soup is, but nevertheless, the mother might be able to judge his real feelings by the speed with which he eats and how he looks when taking a spoonful. Whenever we play a role, we expect of others to respect the expression that is created of us, given that most of the time we play that role for others. Sometimes we believe in that expression that is created of us, and sometimes we don't. Or to be more precise, sometimes the expression that we create of ourselves is what would considered to be authentic, and sometimes not. Goffman calls that cynical. Not in a judgmental or insulting way. Sometimes it is just a simple necessity. Sometimes it is even expected of us to lie or to be cynical given the role we play at that moment. We might even use cynicism towards our role to isolate our inner or true self, whatever that may be, that's a different discussion, from contact with an audience. Kind of a defense mechanism. Often, when we take on a social role, there is a facade pre-created by society that we can take on, and that might be expected of us to take on, to be taken serious in our role. It dictates a certain set of actions and expressions that correlate to make up that facade. Whether we have certain kind of tasks to fulfill, or we just like the facade, we have to conform to both the task and the facade to create a coherent image. Those facades might seem restrictive towards our self-expression. And to be honest, they are in a certain kind of way, because changing them isn't really something that can be done by just one person over a short period of time. But they have one added benefit. They make it easier for society as a whole to interact, because a facade conveys one specific image, and so everyone who is part of that particular society instinctively knows how to act when presented with a specific facade. Now, if we take a step away from Goffman's and Core's still sociologic approach and go deeper into actual theater studies, we are greeted with a multitude of different definitions as to what theater is. Now, I will not try to give a definition of theater. I would even argue that it is actually impossible to give one definition that encompasses all of what we would generally call theater. I would view it more as an umbrella term under which a lot of definitions fall, from which we can always just pick one that fits our current point of view concerning what we want to look at and how we want to look at it. For example, a definition of theater that has a heavy focus on text and dialogue might be a good fit for looking at Greek tragedies, especially considering that we don't really know in detail how they were performed. And most of what we have left today are just the dramatic text. But for obvious reasons, it doesn't really work if we look at forms of theater that don't use speech. But for our view regarding social roleplay and theater in everyday life, there is one definition that I think is very helpful. The base definition is given by Eric Bentley in his 1965 work, The Life of Drama, and is rather simple. The theatrical situation reduced to a minimum is that A impersonates B while C looks on. By the way, Eric Bentley was born in 1916 and is still alive today. He is 103 years old, and there are pictures of him sitting next to Bertolt Brecht, who was one of the most influential playwrights in the 20th century. However, this will not be about Bentley, but more about German theater scholar Erika Fischer-Lichte. Based on Bentley's definition, she talked about 4 dimensions or aspects of theatricality, which in interplay create what is called the theatrical process. However, keep in mind that categorizing those processes into 4 categories will always be artificial. In reality, they are always just aspects of one bigger process, aspects that are inseparably and mutually related to each other. Cultural scientist Timo Heimerdinger later went on and applied those dimensions on cultural processes or to cultural processes, and most of the next section will be based on his and Fischer-Lichte's writings, just so you know my sources. Those 4 dimensions are staging, performance, corporality, and perception. Staging means how means of expression are used and arranged on the stage. It's basically what a director does. Going back to Bentley, this means the content of the impersonated B, because we usually only see the result of that process. In culture, this can mean how we use cultural signs depending on what effect we want to produce, and the shaping of systems of those signs. For example, what kind of clothing we wear can serve as a sign of our belonging to a certain social group. We stage our own costume to show that. Here we have a viewpoint of culture as text. Every cultural action serves as a sign that can be read and refers to something else. Like in the example, me belonging to a certain social group. The dimension of performance means the actual execution of what has been staged, but it also applies to the act of watching it from the point of view of the audience. It is the impersonating and looking on. Culture never just exists. it always has a medium and context in which it is conveyed. The same piece of writing has a totally different effect if it is read out loud, read in meter, or even sung. What is important here is that it's highly situational. When we view culture as performative, we always have the aspect of repeating an already existing aspect of culture, but by repeating it, we also change it creatively. Performance constitutes reality. There is a whole field of linguistics that examines linguistic statements as performative. For example, the "I do" someone says at a wedding serves a performative function by changing the status from not married to married. The two main thinkers that I know of that wrote about this are Judith Butler and J.L. Austin. Here we also see another aspect of why I like this theory of theatricality as a way to describe culture. It encompasses both aspects of culture seen as text and culture seen as performance. The next aspect is corporality. As stated before, culture can only exist in the context of a medium, and that medium always has a certain kind of materiality. Especially on stage, the means of expression and the body of the actor are often one and the same. An actor can only portray a role in accordance to his physique, and the same applies to any aspect of culture. Each body never just means something, it always is something. For example, I'm about 6'1". There is nothing I can do to change that. I could shave and cut my hair and whatnot, but there will always be some people intimidated by me, just by my height. The last aspect is perception. It is the see that looks on. For theater, this is especially important. There is no show without someone watching it. The audience is one of the most important aspects of theater. Almost everything else can be cut. Stage, props, lighting, text. There even have been some shows where at least parts were realized without actors present, by using pre-recorded footage or sometimes even robots. The groundbreaking theater group Rimini Protocol has even done a production called Uncanny Valley, which is solely done by a single animatronic robot on stage with the addition of pre-recorded sound files of the used text. I admit, one might argue if that would still count as theater or not, but what is important here, that even that would not have worked if there was no audience and no one to see it. Everything that is done in terms of culture has to be interpreted by someone else. Otherwise, it will not really be a part of culture. Every sign gets its interpretation only in the context of an audience. Each member of the audience has to interpret signs for themselves and thereby create meaning. Meaning that can totally differ from that created by other members of the same audience. Now, the interesting part about social roleplay is that everyone is audience and actor at the same time. Everything we do in public is watched by others. And every time we go out in public, we watch others. We are even part of our own audience. Self-perception and self-reflection play a huge role in how we act and present ourselves in our daily life. In the end, Shakespeare was right. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. So, to summarize really quick, we act in our daily life based on pre-existing social roles and facades that we can use to shape how others react to us, and that sometimes we are expected to take on. When impersonating these roles, we have to keep 4 dimensions of theatricality in mind that also help us to analyze culture in a certain way. Staging, basically what signs we use. Performance, how we act them out. Corporality, how the material body appears on which the signs are realized. And perception, the fact that we are constantly seen by others and ourselves. So, I hope that I could give a small but interesting glimpse in as to what theater studies is and how it might even be of use in our daily life. Thank you all so much for your attention and have a nice day.